India first always has been Maldivian foreign policy over
Mm.
the years. However, we have seen some conflicts and some disagreements between Maldives and India since Dr. Wahid administrations, Mao and your administration. Uh, and now we have seen an India out campaign initiated by you. Why an India out campaign?
It has not always been India first in our relationship. India has been a neighborly country, a good neighbor. So India, we have always given preference, but not necessarily India first. India first was a more recent affair. India first was a more recent affair. I think India first policy was adopted when Modi was ushered in as prime minister. Then India also wanted India to be a good neighborly country. So that is, I think, when India first policy started. And the conflicts you see during the time of President Wahid and more recently during my time is because we have been very strong nationalistic leaders, I believe. And when India tries to usurp our independence, sovereignty, that is not good, that is not acceptable to us. The intrusion into our domestic affairs, intrusion into our foreign policy is certainly not something that I could withstand. So this is why I think there was conflict between Indian government and Maldives at that time during my regime. India, for example, in the pretext of flying helicopters here for the Maldivians' benefit, they had deployed some amount of foreign military, Indian military here, and that was not acceptable to me. Indian helicopter service did not serve its purpose, and therefore I requested Indian authorities to remove the helicopters because we had no need for them. And helicopters had no night vision, and most of the search and rescue is also covering night time, not only daytime flying. And for this, we requested a Donia with night vision gadgets fixed. And India was not able to deliver that. India was insisting on maintaining the helicopters. And simply that was not good enough for us. We requested India to remove the helicopters. Unfortunately, it was not to be. India refused to take the helicopters, refused to take their military personnel out. So this is something forcibly enforced on on a sovereign country, however neighborly we may be, is not something acceptable to Maldivians, and certainly not to leaders like me. And that is, I think, why the large conflict, or more significant conflict you see, or confrontation you see between Indian policies, foreign policy, and Maldivian foreign policy, which simply we don't converge. Simply, we don't converge in our neighborhood. The Indian foreign policy is something that I, as a leader, do not accept. The hegemonic influence they would want to influence on all their neighbors is something I don't think any of the neighbors would like. But unfortunately, India is a country to reckon with. India has been a great neighbor. Even now, we believe Maldivian people and Indian people, we are friendly, but unfortunately, the Indian government's foreign policy is something that we cannot live with. And why India out? Simply for this reason. They have been interfering in our domestic policy, they have been interfering in our foreign policy, and they have been usurping basically all our resources, all our independence, sovereignty, every right that is enshrined in our constitution, so sacred to us. This has been usurped by Indians, and that is why we believe we can't stand it anymore. And this is not only simply basically, this is not only simply infringing on the rights. When you infringe on the rights, a country's development is impeded, development is stopped, and we have no option but for everything to go through India, and that is certainly not the best choice. And that is why you see fairly loud and articulate voice against India from us.
Mr. President, that was your explanation regarding the ongoing protests. However, that the Indian community and the Maldian, some of the Maldian politicians uh, name you and state you as a anti-Indian. What's your?
Absolutely rubbish. I'm not anti-Indian, but I am more pro-Maldivian. What about the leaders here? Are they able to give any rational explanation as to why Indian military presence needs to be here? I simply haven't heard any of the Maldivian leaders giving a reasonable explanation, or even an adequate explanation as to why Indian personnel need to be here. So this is totally outlandish, really.
So you are not against the Indian people or the trade between Maldives and India or any
Do
community?
you see anything from my side, any remark against Indian people? We have Indian teachers, we have Indian health officials, we have other service industry people here in India. Do we see PPM or myself or any of our leaders commenting or remarking negatively about Indians living here? We've been talking about Indian foreign policy. We have been talking about India's military presence here.
Will there be any disagreement between people of India and Maldives people?
I don't think there's any disagreement between people of India and Maldives. We are neighborly countries. And the option, I will answer you in a counter question. Do you think we'll be subjugated to India and we lose our independence just to restore goodwill of India? Do you think it is an option for Maldives to give up our sovereignty, to subjugate our independence? Is that the option that the other leaders are talking about?
In various occasions, you have given a very strong words to Indian governments, especially after your election, 2018 elections. And we have seen, as per your party, as per the opposition, 1st February, some people describe as a judicial coup. Oh, and you have linked the judicial coup between Maldivian judiciary and Indian. Is there any link to India regarding the judicial coup?
Is this a good observation that I linked the judicial coup to India? Or was it President Nasheed who linked it?
What's your?
No. If you journalists do go back to your work, revisit your work, I think it is President Nasheed who said that it's Indian government who helped them through the election, and therefore the way the election was rigged, we all have seen it, and we have seen those comments from people very close to Supreme Court justices.
And also, just now you also have mentioned that the 2000 election was rigged by Indian.
Yes.
In which way you're saying that it has been rigged?
No, this is a remark made by President Nasheed, and we endorse the remark. We endorse the remark, and we know well that this effort was started from February 2008, February 1st, 2018. First was a judicial coup because everybody knew that through a proper ballot box, there was no way to defeat the president at that time, incumbent President Yameen. So they tried every other means. First, they tried a judicial coup. And I think if you journalists read well the judicial coup's history, we all believe that that was a coup aimed at bringing down a government. And therefore, that would be a premature demise of a government, a legitimate government. And that was done by India. That was done by India. And then more recently, during 2018, later 2018 election, clearly it was President Nasheed who said that it is India who helped them rig the election. And we are only endorsing what President Nasheed said. And clearly we have seen India's intervention in these affairs.
We have seen some people, some politicians saying that some of the members of election commissions under the pocket of Indian embassy back then. Do you have any say? Do you believe?
Tell me, you are a journalist. Do you believe some journalists are on Indian payroll?
Do you believe that election commissions members were in pocket of?
Do you believe journalists have been reporting fair and accurate picture of Maldivian politics here? And similarly, whether election commissions officials were in the pockets of Indian embassy, an investigation needs to be done, isn't it? We know clearly the way elections commission proceeded with the ballot papers, how they proceeded with the ballot papers, destroying all the ballot papers. It's clearly unlawful. It's clearly unlawful. Normally in elections commission, after even a council election, they maintain the ballot papers for something like at minimum 6 months. Supreme Court ruling was out, declaring that I would be able to contest this, I would be able to go through the ballot papers. And when I wanted to exercise that right, 2 days or 3 days after Supreme Court ruling was out, all the ballot papers were shredded. Why would the ballot papers need to be shredded like that if there wasn't something that they wanted really to hide? A reasonable person should give an explanation. Why has the Prosecutor General been silent on that? Why has the Supreme Court been silent on that? Why has the National Defense Force and the Police Force been silent on that? They clearly know that the most important national security aspect has been really infringed. Presidential election is the most important aspect of national security. And when that is removed from us in such an overwhelming manner, all the national security apparatus, law enforcement authorities, education bodies like Supreme Court or the courts, they have all failed in their national duty. And that is the suffering we are undergoing now.
We have seen that you also had a very good relationship there with the Indian government at the beginning of your administration, and now also we have seen that President Solhi also having a strong bond with the Indian government. So, what do you think the government of Maldives, current president of Maldives, and the government of India are doing a bit more than they should?
Clearly surrendering the national security or national sovereignty. That is clearly what this government is doing. What Maldivian leaders always maintain with Indian authorities is good neighborly relations, very preferred relationship with India. But that does not necessarily require us to tender our sovereignty to Indians. That is what's the difference between President Yameen's regime and President Solih's regime or President Nasheed's regime. They surrendered national security, they surrendered independence, they surrendered sovereignty to India. And that is not something I'm able to accept. And that's the difference between President Solih and President Yameen's government. Can any journalist, can even the Legislative Assembly, for example, the parliament here, can they require Indian authorities to disclose any of the agreements Maldivian government has with India? Even Maldivian government is saying we are unable to disclose without sanction or without authority from Indian authorities. So when do we wake up journalists? Do we need to wake up to this call?
You have mentioned that if the PPM comes back to the government,
It's not a question of if. It is due. It is overdue. It's not a question of if PPM comes to government. Inshallah, we will be the next government.
Are you going to terminate the contracts that has been made between the government of Maldives and India?
That is yet to be seen. But what I can assure is all detrimental agreements to Maldivian national security and Maldivian resources, all of them will be terminated. Absolutely, no question about that.
do you think the loans?
And do you think any other political leader would say that?
Do you think?
Do you think a political leader would say that? So that's the difference. Journalists need to gauge the difference between political leaders, their stand they have taken and why they have taken their stance. And what I'm saying, I'm challenging them. Can any of them say anything against India? Anything against Indian invasion into our Indian invasion into our independence and sovereignty? Can any of the leaders remark on that? All they're saying is that we are not sure about that. If they're not sure about that, it is their business to find out what is going on in their coalition government. They should find out.
We have seen huge borrowing from India over the past 3 years. Do you think the loans we have taken from India has to be restructured?
There's no question that they need to be restructured, but whether or not India is willing to restructure is a different matter. It is not up to the Maldivian government to restructure them. The donor has every right whether or not they will restructure those loans. Otherwise, what we need to do is we need to go elsewhere, borrow and repay Indian government. There's no question of our voluntarily restructuring those loans. Last time, if you remember, I think I have mentioned several times about GMR agreement and the paying back of GMR agreement. Indian authorities gave us a very short period of time to pay up the arbitration award. So that is how restructuring also will go. If another Maldivian government, not this current government, if another Maldivian government, like PPM government, if he requests for restructuring, I'm absolutely certain that they will not restructure. That is not what they have done in the past. They required GMR repayment after the arbitration award was done. They required a very short breathing space for Maldivian government to repay the arbitration award. And we did that as well, but that was very tough doing that. But now here we're talking about $2 billion, $2 million of debt. And if Maldivian government were to pay that in a short period of 3 to 6 months, there's absolutely no way you can do that. And then you don't talk about restructuring. You talk about paying your debt.
During your administration, China was your biggest lender.
Yeah.
Former President Nasheed says that the loan from China is a debt trap. What do you think about it?
It is not what I think about it. It is what you think about after praising President Nasheed's irresponsible statements. It's what the public needs to know. And that's the responsibility of journalists. He's a politician, I'm a politician as well. So is there anything that President Nasheed has said is reflective of the situation, of what he says? He's a loose talker. He's a loose talker. He will talk about these things, but it is up to journalists, it's up to people who evaluate these statements to evaluate and bring the truth to the public. What I say should not be taken as a given. It should be tested
Now,
against
what's
facts.
your opinion about
No,
it?
it is the opinion of the journalists to analyze this.
He's the former president of Maldives.
He was a former president.
He's the current speaker of the parliament.
That doesn't mean he has to.
he has
No. That doesn't mean he has to be. He has to tell the truth all the time.
he,
And clearly, he's
he
not
has
a
been
person who
saying
tells
it
it.
over and again. What?
If you tell a lie 100 times or 1,000 times, a lie does not change into a truth. All you need to do is find the facts.
What do you think the motive?
No, it's not what I think. It's what the journalist needs to find out about his statements.
What do you think the motive of his saying?
What is the motive of saying that? What is the motive? Tell me, what would be the motive?
What do you think?
That is purely undermining my borrowing from China, isn't it?
Or do you think he has another political ambition behind it?
Another political ambition.
Behind his agenda?
No, openly he has been very anti-China, and openly he has been very pro-India. Is that enough? But whatever he has said about China, Maldivian government under my regime giving China 18 or 19 islands on lease, and some of the current ministers, they have also been reiterating his comment. Is there any truth to this? Is there any truth to this? Maldives is a small country. Whatever that goes on here can be easily can be easily appraised by any journalist who cares to find out whether this is true. So whatever President Nasheed says is not the truth. More oftentimes he lies than tells the truth. That's President Nasheed. That's President Nasheed. He is a political master. He's a spin master. He will never tell you anything reflective. It will always be misrepresented. That is President Nasheed. So what about those 20 or more islands that were given to the Chinese? Is there any truth to any of that? More borrowing from China than India. Is there any truth to that? We are indebted to China. Is there any truth to that? Look at the financing cost of Indian loans versus Chinese loans. There's absolutely no truth in whatever he says. Absolutely no truth.
With the financial experts in the World Banks and IMF and those financial institutes have been asked current government to reduce their expenditures. And we have seen that current difficulties in the world economy. And we have seen a lot of difficulties in Maldivian economy. What do you comment on that, Maldivian current economy?
That's factual, isn't it? That is factual. But we don't get into that mess unless it is created by us. It's a mess that Maldivian government has created for itself and its people. This is not because of difficulty in the world. This is not because of economic difficulties around the world. This is not because of COVID. It's bad policies. It's bad financial policies. Even now, the government is talking about not collecting tourism dues. So even if finance minister anticipates a lot of revenue from tourism, that is not to be. Why would any resort owner pay his resort rentals when several others have not paid and no measures have been taken against them? Why would the others pay rent on time? It was only, I think, last week that Tourism Minister Mausum has remarked that even though these rents, huge areas are not paid to the government, they are going to be very lenient. If you have a very lenient policy towards collecting your revenues, then we will suffer. We will suffer. And this is a suffering that we have brought on to ourselves by the government's bad policies.
Do you think President Solih is capable of managing our economy?
Do I need to comment on that?
What's your opinion?
No, I don't need to give an opinion on that.
Because you have been.
No. Very sorry. You're not going to get it out of me. You have to gauge. Who will be responsible for the mismanagement here? Who is responsible for economic misery here? Who is responsible for all the costs going up? Who is responsible for shortage in dollar? Who is responsible for all the budget deficits? Who is responsible for fiscal mismanagement? Do you want me to spell out all of this? What is more credible? Another one politician criticizing the other politician, or journalists, after analyzing, brings the truth to the public. What is more credible? So that's the role for the journalists, not for politicians. Whatever President Solih does, and whatever cover-up story is given by his deputy or finance minister, it will be tested against facts. And when it is tested against facts, I think public knows the truth. And it is not for another politician, opposition politician like me, to spell it out to the public. The public knows that. When your spending on domestic consumption goes up, you know what is happening. If you want, I can cite you some figures on domestic consumption, how the prices have gone up during the last 2 weeks. It's something that journalists needs to bring out to the public. That would be more credible rather than politicians talking about it, isn't it?